back. Let's just take a quick look at what's happening on the global and local markets, as well as the commodities. As we can see, the JSE All Share is up 1% this morning at 52,511 points. Of course, markets are being inspired by Donald Trump's pledge to introduce phenomenal tax reforms. He's expected to announce those reforms in around 2 to 3 weeks. But we saw Wall Street rally to a record, Asia higher, and we've also opened to the positive. Banks up a strong 1.8% this morning, as our financials, resources up 1%, and industrials also strongly firmer. Onto some commodities. We see the gold price pulling back, obviously, as renewed confidence was instilled in the dollar, which weighed on the likes of gold. Platinum down 1.6%, and Brent crude slightly firmer. As for the rand, slightly firmer at 13.38, but of course it's all about Donald Trump's economic policies, or tax policies rather, on corporate tax, which will be announced soon. But in studio now to join us and look at how the markets have reacted to the state of the nation address is Michael Traherne, who's a portfolio manager at Vestact, and Muzi Mathema, who is an economist at KPMG. Good morning, gentlemen. And of course, Bonnie is still with us on the line from Nairobi. Michael, let's just kick off with you. The markets are up this morning, strongly up this morning. What did they make of the SONA speech last night?
Oh, the SONA speech last night was reality TV at its best. As far as markets go, nothing new was really said. NDP still what's going to be guiding the ANC and the government, and that hasn't changed. The reason the markets are up so strong this morning, really strong trade data out of China before our markets open. I think that's a positive note coming through. US markets up overnight. So positive impacts moving our market. We need to remember that more than 50% of the profits earned on the JSE are out of our borders. So as much as SONA does impact some of it, I think the budget speech is going to be far more market moving than what happens in Parliament.
Hey, Michael, Bonnie here. It seems like the markets was more concerned with the drama in Parliament and less of the speech. And it's the drama and all the chaos that seems to be driving the sentiments, and not so much about the content of the speech.
Yeah, look, I think a right hook to EFF members is it's more entertainment than it is a market-moving policy. And if you're an investor, you're looking 5-10 years out. You're not worried about what's going to be happening short-term. From a market participant, is your capital secure if you put it into the country, and are you going to get a fair risk reward for putting your money in? Jacob Zuma was talking about policies for government to get more involved. Given, though, that government had wasteful and irregular expenditure of 46 billion rand, just in case you didn't have that, 46 billion rand, and for a third time, 46 billion rand in wasteful expenditure, I'd rather see government focusing on getting their own house in order than getting more involved in the economy. And this isn't only a South African government thing. Governments in general are notorious for being very inefficient, and growth comes and the pie gets bigger. You don't get more inclusive economy by trying to share the same pie between more people. What happens is the people who have the big chunk of the pie just leave, and then everyone who's left still has nothing. You need to grow the pie, and the only way you grow the pie is being business-friendly, being given guidance of where things are going, and being as efficient as possible as a government.
And then, Muzi, let's bring you in here. What were your key takeaways from that State of the Nation, and particularly in terms of how you see the economy going forward from here?
Thematically, there's nothing new that the president announced. Of course, there was a higher emphasis on radical transformation, which is not a South African invention. We have, in our lifetime, seen radical transformation in China, South Korea. We've seen a lot of Asian countries. And at the same time, in sub-Saharan Africa, we've seen thematic announcements of radical transformation since the 50s, and the gap between the Asian countries and the sub-Saharan countries is how that has been implemented. So nothing new from the president. I think my key take is, how do we see that implementation rolling out? The president does seem to announce that there will be more involvement of state capitalism, but my question is, do we have the fiscal space for that state capitalism? In the last 3 budget announcements, the minister has seen to be keen trimming down on state expenditure, so we certainly don't have the expenditure or the state space to make that sort of expansion as a state. Yeah.
And Muzi, the timing of the transformation message coming from the president, I mean, obviously it's an important factor for the South African economy, but looking at it coming on his last State of the Nation address, it sounded more populist than pragmatic.
Yes, you are correct, but then I think the taste of that pudding will come on his implementation of that policy.
And then, Michael, I'm quite interested in, and the president said that, you know, in terms of this economic inclusion or transformation, he did say what many surveys and statistics have said, that the pace of transformation is obviously too slow. And we see that with the ownership in the JSE. But he said that this transformation now has to move beyond share ownership schemes, which many companies on the JSE have introduced. How did you interpret that? So what does that mean?
Yeah, so look, I think that the stat he used is a bit misguiding, because you might not have direct ownership, but the PRC is the biggest money manager in South Africa, and the majority of their investors are black South Africans. So by doing the maths, you see quite quickly that black South Africans own more than 10% of the JSE indirectly through their pension fund. So that's definitely a good thing. I think for everyone involved, transformation needs to happen quicker, but it can't happen unless you've got the skills in place, unless the pie keeps growing. I mean, you've got skilled individuals who are white males in the positions that they're at, rightly or wrongly because of the past. You need to, with growth, you can then introduce black males, black females into positions to help speed up transformation. But transformation is easiest to implement with growth. And when you're growing at less than 1%, where do you find these new positions to implement transformation? So I think you want to be more focusing on getting growth, and by growth your byproduct is transformation, and not trying to focus on transformation and potentially hurt growth.
Muzi, we've had the DA pledge that they're going to challenge the deployment of security officers in Parliament in court. We are seeing increased noises, political noises, that is. And President Jacob Zuma is still in office till 2019. How do you see these noises affecting business going forward, and especially the ratings coming up in June?
Bonnie, there was very limited market movement yesterday, and I think the market has come to a position where they've become numb to the chaos that we see in Parliament. As I say, to me, the real gap that comes here is what implementation comes into play. For example, the president spoke about beneficiation in the mining space. Is there enough skills within local entrepreneurs to enter, say, the jewelry sector and compete against international jewelry makers in the beneficiation sector? He touched on Invest SA, which is not a new concept. Does our fiscal policy, does our tax policy make South Africa an attractive investment destination? He had limited discussion on state-owned entities, who are key stakeholders if state capitalism is the way South Africa is going to grow. So my key take is implementation is always what is vital with such policies.
So we've been quite downbeat on the State of the Nation address. I'm interested in finding out if there were any positives that we took from it. Anything positive that came from it?
I don't know, the entertainment at the beginning. Look, I don't think South Africans have ever really been interested in what politicians have been saying until the ruckus that's been going on in Parliament. And I think, rightly or wrongly, democracy needs conflict and friction, and I don't think the ANC's had competition in the past because they've been so dominant. So from a democracy point of view, more opposition parties saying more, I think is good for everyone involved, including the ANC. And I think going forward, as South Africans, I think our democracy is still strong.
Yeah. I think additionally, just to add to what Michael has said, I think every society has the right to interpret democracy in the way they see it. We have a very vocal and protest-driven democracy. So to me, this was as per expectation. But a positive thing that did come out, which I think no one has mentioned, was that we now have a stable electricity supply, and it's evident in the lack of power cuts that we've had. But remember, electricity and the amount of power that you can generate is vital to the level of growth that you can generate as an economy. What I want to see happening in the coming few months is how much electricity capacity does the government plan to increase us by, and what funding is being availed to address that electricity capacity. Secondly, the president did touch on how NASFA's debt had been cancelled. But also important, we want to see what policies have been put into place that reduce education inequality. We don't want to see another heightened fees must fall issue. Yeah.
And Muzi, let me just add on to the fact that a lot of people expected a lot more on state-owned entities, and that we didn't see that coming out. Michael, probably, if you were to reverse time, what would you have loved the president to say on regards to SOEs?
I think in as much as the president was never going to put any details on any policy, at least a statement that says we as the government will look to tightening and managing our state-owned entities, or direct our state-owned entities to meet these A, B, C, D goals that we've announced.
And Michael, your response to that, what did you what did you hope he could have possibly said on state-owned entities?
Yeah, look, I think maybe a bit more clarity on what's happening with the nuclear deal. I did like that he was saying that we're going to push a lot more into renewable energies, and a lot of research has shown that by the time nuclear power plants would be built, renewable energies would be so cheap that it would have been better to go with them anyway from the beginning. So I think going down that road is a good path to go. But I think at the end of the day, you want to see accountability in state-owned entities for if you're making bad decisions, if you allocating capital where it shouldn't be, people should be held accountable. The president was talking about the private sector being held more accountable for collusion, and I think that's a very good step. Free enterprise requires that anyone can come in and out of a market, so that's a very good thing. But on the flip side, I'd like to see a lot more accountability on state-owned enterprises, because if they're running efficiently, the country's doing better, you've got more money, you don't have to worry about a debt downgrade if your money's been spent correctly.
Well, thanks, Michael, and thanks to Muzi. That's where we're going to have to leave it. That was, of course, Michael Trehono of Vestact and Muzi Mathema from KPMG.